Hi, this is Ken Blanchard. Welcome to the Blanchard LeaderChat podcast, where my friend and colleague Chad Gordon interviews experts helping support our vision of leaders powered for good. If that's your mission too, I know you'll be inspired by what you hear. I'll be back at the end to share what I've learned. Enjoy this episode of the Blanchard LeaderChat podcast.
Heather Younger, welcome back to the Blanchard Leader Chat podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I cannot complain. I can always try to, but it makes no difference.
Who's listening, right? But a lot of
Exactly.
listeners are here today. They're here specifically to learn more about your latest book, The Art of Self-Leadership. Why this book? Why now?
I kind of feel like all we have to do is just look around in the world and see how we're all a little bit bonkers. And I feel
hmm
like with self-leadership, it's really helping us to kind of ground ourselves and refocus ourselves and be able to say, I can control and influence myself more than I can do anybody else around me. And that's a lot about what self-leadership is focused on.
The way the book is pieced together, it's very introspective in the beginning chapters. Talk about
Mhm.
kind of the journey you want your readers to go through as they get a better understanding of themselves.
So, how I have the book broken down is into three parts. One is on self-understanding, the second's personal growth and sustainability, and then the third is more social interaction and influence. And I started off that way because I feel like often when I speak to leaders and I talk to them in audience and things, oftentimes they seem to put a lot on the outside world. What I mean by that is they seem to abdicate responsibility for their own journey. Also seem to not really understand what they stand for so they can know what they can fight against or what they can run to. And so in the self-understanding chapter, it really is helping them to understand what their core values are, and then what they're prepared to do for those as far as moving forward or stopping something. It helps them, grow in a little bit more self-awareness, dig into their limitations, and even the role of kind of failure and what that
Mm.
looks like for them.
Yeah, know thyself. Start there. So, what have you
Yeah.
found as you're coaching people, as you're working with people? Where do people get hung up on that introspective because as you said, most people really look externally, and it's really hard for them to take that hard look on the inside. So, if somebody wanted to get started and really take that good hard look, how does somebody really get a better understanding of what is helping make them tick?
I think the number one exercise they can do, and I do, talk about this in the book, is just to list kind of your top five values, what you stand for. I think it's such an important question to ask for. What are the things that I value most, and what are the things that I don't? Because then what you could do is once you write those down and you say why, now everything that comes towards you in your work life or personal life, you're able to gauge against the things you said you value. And then you can also say, well, I'm going to delete that from my list because I obviously don't value that anymore. I'm going to change and replace that with something else, something higher that meets my new vision for myself. And so I feel like if we don't know what we stand for, it's just hard to kind of stop a practice or stop a relationship or get out of a role if we don't know what it is that we do, like where we stand and what we value most. Once we do, I just feel like it's easier to say, yep, I'm gonna move towards that. Nope, I'm moving away of that. It's just
Yeah.
easier to do.
Yeah. You dive into fear as well. How is that helpful to understand fear and as it applies to your own development?
I think often what happens in the fear space is uh well, we stop ourselves. We stop ourselves from speaking up in meetings. We stop ourselves from going out for that job. There's just a lot of things that we stop ourselves, and we might blame other people, and we may think it's an outside world view, but it has a lot to do with us. And sometimes the fears are from our childhood, where someone told us we weren't good enough, we weren't worthy enough. And so then we don't put our best foot forward, and we don't go out for the things that we think we want and love because we think we just can't. And so, oftentimes, if we can't beat that, if we can't get to the bottom first of what the fear is, it's hard for us to move past it. We can't reframe it. We can't, go to therapy or get a
Mm.
coach to help us move past it. We have to go deep. So this process, it is introspective because we go to places sometimes that hurt and they bring us back to certain times, but we can't move forward until we go there.
after the self-reflection, we get into understanding your limitations. And so that, you're not saying here, hey, you know, we're only going to go so far. But you talk about those limitations in a very real way, so people can really dig at what makes what is possible. So how does somebody understand what their limitations are, and how do you use that to make better decisions?
I think that the limitations really start from a place of, again, going back to the values. If we understand what it is we value and where it came from, oftentimes our values stem from something in the past, something when we were a child. And then there's this thing that maybe we were told we weren't, either via words or actions, that we weren't good enough, that we weren't worthy enough of some particular thing. So oftentimes we think of limitations as an external thing, where it's something at work, something, a job, a budget. But in fact, much of what I've noticed, our limitations are self-imposed. It's things that are in our head. It's things that we perceive, and oftentimes we perceive things that are like incongruent with the value. And how does that knock up against it? I always say that a great exercise on all of this is to kind of write down. I mean, let's just put pen to paper on this and write down what you think kind of your limitations are, and then I want you to kind of go through the exercise of saying which ones of these actually are driven by you, and which ones someone actually dictated that you can't do this, that, or this. And then once you do that, I'd love for you to like take it deeper and say, how much do the things that now you see are more self-imposed tie back to the thing that you say you value or you don't value? And so again, all of this stuff is introspective. Some of these activities are just in the book to make you go deeper and deeper to understand where those limitations are coming from. But not all. Like I'll speak to audiences often, and
Yeah.
the leaders will say, "Well, it's the budget. Well, it's my manager. Well, the senior leadership team won't let us do this. Well, this is," and it's just like, stop waiting. Stop the insanity. That's what's. We're just waiting for green lights. We're waiting for permission, and there's no like buddy coming to save us. We
Right.
have to know our own limits so we can save ourselves.
And that feeds so perfectly into the second part, which you talk about personal growth and sustainability. I mean, when you think about the art of self-leadership, if you don't take care of yourself, if you don't set those boundaries, if you don't nurture your vessel, who will, right? So when you think about personal growth and sustainability, we dive into the first part. I love this about between progress and perfection. Why do you have to decide between those two things?
Well, I think, if you're somebody who leans into this idea that everything has to be perfect, there's just no way you'll ever get there. So like this, your idea of growing and being at a place where you feel joyful, or you feel strong, or capable, it'll be hard to do if everything you do is through a lens of perfection. But if you say, okay, I'm actually looking for my next failure point. I'm looking for the place where I don't do quite exactly where I'm at, because I want the feedback. I want to see how
Yeah.
much better I can get. You're always striving for that. That's how you get better. So you can't go from the lens of that perfection. You have to go from the lens of progress.
How do you coach people the value of self-care in this day and age when everything seems to be on demand and we seemingly could be available 24/7? How do you ensure that we take care of ourselves?
Yeah, I mean, well, I think we need to ensure that we take care of ourselves.
Yeah.
We cannot outsource our own self-care. And this is what happens, is like we're waiting for some manager to say you get time off, or we're waiting for like our spouse to say, okay, I'll take care of this. And instead of just saying, this is what's happening. This
Hmm.
is what's happening. And I'm going to say this, I'm not perfect at this. I have 4 children. I'm over 50, and it took me into my mid 40s to get to the point where I said, what the heck are you doing? Like, you cannot very well think you're going to lead all these people and do it well if you don't lead you. And so self-care means so many different things for different people. Me, it means like, getting my water in, getting my sleep in. That's just it sounds basic, but most
Yeah.
people aren't doing that. And then
Right.
it's like going to the gym, and then it's doing my prayer, and then it is cuddling with my kids. For everybody, it's different. But I do make it a priority, because I remember there'd be days where I'd be like, nah, like just grumpy because I hadn't given to myself at all in like days. And so at some point, I even decided to subscribe to one of those massage services. So you can go get a massage or a facial. It's supposed to be once a month. I still only go once a quarter. But I said, I gotta have something that I can like put my foot down for myself, because no one else was telling me I couldn't do it. I did put my foot down for myself, so I could rise above it and I could shine more brightly for other people. It was up to me.
Yeah. So let's move on to part three. Talk about social interaction influence. What does that mean for you? What does it mean in the frame of this book?
when you think about the kind of like the definition of self-leadership really being kind of that inward
Yeah.
work to create more shine and brilliance outwardly, and then making kind of building into more self-awareness and resilience and intentional action. When you think about that, there's that outward brilliance part. And I say you have to do those first couple parts, and it happens in tandem. By the way, it may feel very linear, but you have to start it, but then you continue that journey along the way always. But when you are at the point where you feel more filled up, you're able to communicate more effectively, you're able to make sure that the people around you, like your influence is felt not because of your title,
Mm.
but because of how you treat people, because of what you embody and how you, stand in your own shoes, and people look to it and they admire it. A big part of this is feedback, receiving feedback and giving feedback. And how do you do that? And what is your style of showing up? And what is your communication style, period? How do you come off to people? How do you feel about how you communicate? How do people receive you in that way? What I always say is this. I'll ask people this when in audiences. I'll say, well, what's stopping you from being the leader you want to be? What's stopping you from being the leader that I described to you if I'm talking about caring leadership or a better listener? And oftentimes, again, they'll point to other things. They'll point to a budget, a leadership team. There's always something, and they're never saying, uh, well, I mean, I didn't do a really good job of receiving that feedback. Well, I also haven't like conquered my sense of not feeling good enough from the thing that happened in the past. Well, I really haven't taken those certification classes that I wanted, whatever that might be. There's all these things that they could own, but they're choosing to give that ownership away. And so that's where this external influence stuff really comes in, is it's like how much more can you use your voice? How much more can you bring the feedback in and then give it and have this relational way of being without again waiting for someone to give you permission.
Yeah. One of the things so many things I love about Ken, but he talks about leadership and lead. It's something you do with people, and that's another thing that you kind of shared here. It's about relationship building. So how can you make sure that you're successful, but you're not running over people along the way?
One of the things I like to say, I think sometimes with my strength, because I have a certain strength about me and I know it in presence, they may think that, well, whoa, she's gotten so far by herself. Wow, she's like a superhero or superhuman. I even have my kids will say, like, Mom, you're like super mom. Okay, but number one, no, it takes an entire village to get to any level of success. Like you have to include more people. Yes, we have to do certain things by ourselves, but you have to lean on the army of support. So that you can actually move forward. So I think if you're a person who leans on other people and you allow them to lean back into you, providing the spaces, in holding the spaces for them to talk to you and listen and vice versa, then that's how you build the relationships. You shouldn't be stepping on each other's toes, because if you're providing that space where someone's sharing their own selves and a piece of whatever they're going through, then there's a trust that's built, and then whenever whatever you have to like do to go and work aside them, or somehow you get promoted above them, or you're on a project and they aren't, whatever that might be, they are in a trust that it came from a different place. It didn't come from you, that you weren't trying to uh, get something over on them, that in the end you were trying to just, you're just doing you, and someone decided to lift you up and maybe not them. In the workplace, a lot of this stuff happens, right? The conflict and the jealousy and all these things. But if you build that trust and you provide those spaces and you lean in to understand, I feel like that's going to take you really far.
Yeah, I feel like there's been a lot of growth in my end. We were talking before we got on the recording. I've just celebrated the time of this recording a little bit earlier this year, 20 years, and I've always thought I'm a good communicator, but I've learned so much more as we shifted more towards a team environment. If you don't communicate really well and you don't leave you leave the ambiguity out, and you set those clear expectations, clear goals, it's amazing how better a team can work. So that's something you share as a really important thing to learn as well. How do you nurture that? How do you grow that skill if you were trying to do that from scratch?
I like leaning on the team, you mean, and
Yeah.
making sure that you kind of collaborate and working
Yeah.
together. Yeah. So I think I talk about assessments a lot, and I know you all believe in assessments. Doing assessments are great because, particularly if it's done one that's a sound assessment, because then it gives you an insight into, let's say, your communication, your behavioral styles, or it gives you an eye into your strengths, and then the strengths of your teammates and the styles and preferences of your teammates. And now when you come to the table because you're frustrated on a particular thing, and this particular team member likes to be communicated to in a particular way, you come in their way, not in yours. If you're someone who wants to grow in relationship with others, if you aren't somebody who wants to grow in relationship with others, then you may just decide to stay exactly who you are all the time and never ever try to come to the center and try to do that. But with collaborations, people are only going to collaborate with you so many times if they feel like they're never heard by you.
Yeah.
So that's why I talk a lot about listening in just all my work, and I embedded it in this one too, because I do feel like we got to get really good about listening and then truly hearing the other person. That's how we get better at our team work and our collaborations.
Yeah, listening is got to be the most important skill. If you're not doing that, you're going to lose out on so many other things. You talked a little bit about feedback. Gosh, I've asked this question of so many amazing authors like yourself, but give me some tips here. How can I get better at both giving and receiving feedback? Because it's just an area where a lot of people struggle.
One of the real cool things about this book is I have a free feedback assessment in it. So when you take it, you'll get a report that gives you the some tips specifically on giving and receiving feedback if you score kind of low. But I would say this that you really want to be super aggressive and very hungry for someone to point out point out a gap because we all have them. So you want to like go in search of the gap. When you go in search of the gap, when you openly ask, openly receive, and openly respond to the gap, people are going to be motivated to continue to give you feedback on that gap. So um, building up that trust. I have somebody I remember interviewing on my podcast, and he said he would just say, listen, if I say something stupid, like something just really stupid, just stand up and slap the heck out of me. And he's a CEO of a big franchise company. He has a certain accent. I love this guy, but anyway,
Yeah.
but he just had this way, and so people felt like they would giggle, but they felt comfortable telling him something like doing a dissenting opinion, telling him that he had a blind spot. They felt comfortable because he did that. The other day, my son, who's 17, he was telling me about this. He said he commands his squadron for Civil Air Patrol, and he was telling me about he asked one of his team members, "Hey, what do you see as some of my issues? I'd like to get some feedback, and what are the things I can work on?" Seriously, just tell me what it is. And so the person told him like three things. And so then he went about having another meeting or another couple interactions, came back to the person. Again, this person reports to him. And he said, listen, can you tell me, did you see anything different? Did you see any improvements from the last time we spoke? And he goes, yeah, you did this, you did that. And so it was like being hungry to find out what might be wrong with how you're presenting, find out how you fill the gap. Being very aggressive about it is critical. So I think that is very important. As we talk about giving feedback, I think I don't believe in the sandwich method very much because I
Yeah.
feel like when someone teaches you a methodology that's do this X, Y, Z, and then it gets out into the world that you're supposed to do X, Y, Z, then everybody starts to kind of guess that it's about to happen. So, the sandwich method is supposed to be, say something
Yep.
positive, say the critical thing, and then say something positive. Well, people are waiting. So when you say the thing positive and then you say, and then like the people are just waiting for the other shoe to drop. So instead, like just come, don't be so um formulaic with
Yeah.
things. Come from a place of heart, care, desire to uplift, to see the person grow. And when you do that, it's just going to come off better. And guess what? The other thing is I just talked about no perfection, but not doing perfection, but doing progress. So if you think about like the giving a feedback side, you may not do it 100% right every time, but the person knows that you care at the foundation of it. They
Yeah.
just know it because you've actually given them evidence and signs over time. So when you go to them and say, Chad, I was surprised by what happened today. What? Well, in the meeting, I had never seen you respond in that way. I'm curious to know what's going on. Like, what was happening with you there? I just because I'm concerned because I've seen you respond in a much more positive light before. Because I'd love to just talk about what was going on. And so now Chad hears in me a sense of concern,
Yeah.
not like I'm so disappointed in you and you suck and I'm about to fire you. It wasn't that tone. It was more of like, what's going on? I'm curious about you. It makes a huge difference.
I love our talk. We're coming up close to an end. And Heather, I asked this question of all the guests. If there was just one thing that our listeners got out of our conversation today, one thing from all the research in your book, what would you want it to be?
Sure. I would say this: stop waiting for green lights, stop waiting for permission. You might be looking for someone to lead you, or you think that's going to happen, but guess what? You're the best person to lead you. You know you best. And if you don't, through this work of self-understanding, you will. And you'll just be in a much better position to lead you more than anyone else.
The book is called The Art of Self-Leadership. Discover the power within you and learn to lead yourself. Heather Younger, if people want to dig a little bit deeper into you, into the book, learn a little bit more, where would you send them?
I would say if they're looking for the book, it'd be caringleadershiplearning.com. And when you go there, it says book wait list. It's pretty easy just to see the book wait list right at the top. And when you see that, there's the whole page. You can join Team 100. You can pre-order the book. There's lots of different ways to engage, but caringleadershiplearning.com is probably the best way to go.
Wonderful. Heather, once again, thank you so much for being a repeat guest here on the LeaderChat podcast. We so love hearing from you and learning about your latest books. It was an absolute pleasure to get to talk to you today.
Thank you, Chad. I appreciate you.
And thank you for joining us for today's podcast. If you enjoyed the interview, go ahead and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, and please share it with your friends. The best way you can help us grow is feedback. So write a review if you haven't already. This podcast is brought to you by Blanchard, the heart of human achievement. Visit Blanchard.com for additional resources to help you and your organization succeed. Now it's my pleasure to turn today's podcast over to Ken Blanchard for his final thoughts.
I'm a raving fan of Heather Younger's. I endorsed her book, The Art of Self-Leadership, and was thrilled when I knew that Chad was going to interview her. Listen to this interview, read her book, learn how to be a good self-leader so you can be the best that you can possibly be going forward. What a difference it's going to make in 2025. Have the best year ever and make your life something meaningful. Thanks, Chad. Thanks, Heather. Good on you both.